Welcome to Let's Talk Death, conversations to inform and inspire. Let's Talk Death is a series of conversations with some amazing people from various fields. Our goal through these conversations is to normalize, educate, and demystify the taboo around death, dying, and the journey of grief. Hello, welcome to this episode of Let's Talk Death. I'm Fran Solomon.
And I'm Andy McNeil.
And we're thrilled to be your host for these conversations. Let's Talk Death is brought to you by Heal Grief, a social support network creating community after someone has died. Everything we do is inspired by our core belief that no one should ever grieve alone.
Our goal with this program is to have a friendly chat with some amazing people so we can help normalize and educate our Heal Grief community. Our guest today is David Richman. David is an author, public speaker, and endurance athlete whose mission is to form more meaningful human connections through storytelling. His first book, Winning in the Middle of the Pack, discussed how to get more out of ourselves than we ever imagined. With his book, Cycle of Lives, David shares stories of people overcoming trauma and delves in deeply into their emotional journeys with cancer. He continues to do Ironman triathlons and recently completed a solo 4,700-mile bike ride. Wow. So David, we are delighted to have you as a guest on our show.
Thank you, Andy, and thank you, Fran. I'm very, very excited to talk to you guys for a bit.
Thank you. So David, before we speak about your work and your ride, may I ask, was there a death loss that you experienced that actually influenced your life's path?
Yes. I mean, there were a couple. I lost my dad when I was in my very early 20s. And that was tough in one sense because he was really old when I was born, and I kind of never really had a deep relationship with him. But then when he was gone, kind of that finality that I never would have a deep relationship with him. But later in life, the one that probably was more meaningful in the way that it affected my life and my life's past was losing my sister to terminal brain cancer. She was in her early 40s and two young kids, husband, family, the whole thing. And I'm just a year and a half or so younger than her. And that one really hit.
It's interesting you mentioned your dad's death in your early 20s. Quite often, a lot of people's first loss is somewhere about that young adulthood, we know statistically, but then the death of a sibling and to cancer. And so that experience obviously touched your life. How did that kind of shape parts of the direction of where your life went from that point?
Sure. Well, some of that, and thank you, Andy, some of that was realized at the moment, and some of it was realized a little bit over time. But the way I answer it is very truthfully. The way it happened was I was at a point in my life when I got the call from June saying that she had terminal brain cancer. I was at the point in my life where I was on a new path to a new journey. I had just escaped a physically abusive relationship. I had 4-year-old twins. I had just all these stresses in my life. I was a smoker. I was overeating. I was not healthy. I was, yes, I was successful in certain ways, but I was really at a low point in my life. Some of it self-imposed, some of it circumstances, some of it just, hey man, all this stuff is happening right now. And I finally got myself straight on that and said, okay, look, you're at the bottom of your bottom. You got to start figuring out how to get out of it. And I just started figuring that out. What did that mean? What did it mean for me to turn my life around and focus on getting from where I was at that low point of that point A to a better place, point B, down in the future? At the same time that I'm coming to that realization, June gets terminal cancer, and she's going down a journey where she's at point A, which is today, which was for her right before that, a super, super high point, right? Beautiful kids, beautiful husband, beautiful career, and all this wonderful stuff. But her point A to point B was, how do I navigate from today to my impending death? Mine is, how do I navigate from today to finally start living? So it was this this strange kind of dynamic where we were both on a path, and a very purposeful and, meaningful one, even though if, it's not always the greatest one. Certainly for her, it wasn't, but it was very stark, very real paths that we were on from that point A to wherever our point B's were going to be.
Yeah.
And I bet helping her through her point A to point B may have also inspired you for more life.
Oh, no question. Absolutely no question. And look, not everyone has you guys know this more than anybody. Not everyone has a difficult time talking about the emotional facets of trauma, death, terminal illnesses. Not everybody, but most people do. Most people have a really, really difficult time dealing with the emotional side of it. June and I did not together have that difficult of a time. It just seemed to be something that we could easily talk about. And that was, kind of the basis for forming some of my beliefs in how desperate I needed to be to not let life happen accidentally. Because no matter how desperate she could be, it was going to end a certain way for her. And for me, I had the opportunities and the choices, and it really sunk home that you can't just wallow in whatever you've created or whatever life's given you, man. You got to take charge and start forming your own path. And when you're able, right? Because she wasn't able, right?
Yeah. Well, and importantly enough, so many people that we work with, they're at a place in their life where they're realizing that, and I love the way you phrased it, but it's really living intentionally. It's so often we let life decide things for us, and we just react to whatever that is. And so many people who I've encountered over the years who are either grieving the death of someone or someone who themselves has been given a difficult diagnosis. It's sort of this, it's almost that death reminds us that we're alive and really what life is, and that it is fleeting, and that it matters the choices that we make and whether we take hold of that. So thank you for that. That really, I connect with that line of thinking for sure.
Yeah, well, thanks. It was, we talked about a ton, and it made me really observe, because I was always observant, even from a little kid on. I was very observant, but I was not self-aware. Being observant and being self-aware are two totally different things, right? We do as I say, not as I do, right? Right. So we all have kids. We know what that means, right? Don't listen. Don't watch what I did. Just listen to my words. So yeah, that was a major deal, and I was very observant, but not aware. And then here I am on this self-awareness path, and obviously some of that was influenced by what you just said, Andy, of that. Life is fleeting, but you don't really know that until you know it. And even when you're involved in something as serious as terminal cancer or some other type of terminal disease, it still is really difficult for people to wrap their brains around the fact that there's a finite time period to live. I mean, it's just the human brain's just not wired to be able to contemplate that at a very deep, meaningful level. And that's why I think, what you guys do with having conversations, I know a lot of it is after the fact, but having conversations allows us to kind of understand that a little bit better, so that we can bring a more intentional, heart-centered, authentic, kind of leaning into being our best selves and helping other people at a different level. Once you understand that and you really process it in a aware and self-aware way, it really can add some serious value to your life, for sure. At least it did for me.
Yeah, no, it's very, very well put. There's, we mentioned it a lot. There's a couple of researchers, Tedeschi and Calhoun, and for years they've been researching post-traumatic growth, they call it. Instead of post-traumatic stress, it's post-traumatic growth. And they probably have 30 or plus years of just evidence-based studies on people who experience just what you're talking about, experiences in life where it's now I know something I did not know before. And it's interesting. what they talk about with post-traumatic growth is it's different than resilience, because resilience is the idea of you're going through and you're bouncing back. And what they argue is that when difficulties happen in our life, it affects us. It doesn't just bounce off of us. It affects us and it changes us, and we land in a different place than we were before. And quite often that place actually allows us to experience life in a more deep and meaningful way. I'm curious about your being a triathlon and all of the physical things that you're doing. It sounds like that really became an important thing to you. And I guess I'm fascinated with that type of thing because of how those who are able to do that and have that endurance, you're experiencing a different part of life than many people experience, and a different level of connectedness in some ways to your own physical self. So I'm just curious about that and how that, what
Well,
that's.
I think if you immerse yourself into anything that takes a lot of hours where you can reflect, whether that be art or you play an instrument or you form really deep, meaningful relationship with a mentee or a mentor, or you do endurance athletics or something where you can be contemplative and reflective, which for me, that's what endurance athletics was, because I don't think we often take a break like, oh, I got to watch a movie or go bowling or have wine with friends or whatever, but you're not really taking a break. You're not contemplating, you're not being reflective, you're not kind of experiencing, how to overcome challenges and build, work through blocks and those type of things. For me, endurance athletics became important for me to really become introspective and reflective and aware of myself. And it kind of came from this thought, and I'm sure you guys have heard this a ton in your travels. It came from this thought of that, with that, early on when I said I wasn't real self-aware, even though I was super observant, is I realized at that low point that I was talking about that I had lived my life kind of working on expectations, like what I thought people expected of me, or I would be a certain way because I needed to make my mom happy, or which I never could, or a boss happy, which I never could. So I try harder and I do all this stuff because I thought I needed to do things for other people, or that was going to be defining my self-worth or defining who I was. It was just this pattern that I was in. And once I said, yeah, well, maybe you should start worrying about the person in the mirror first, because then you can start helping others. Then you can, be what you need to be for the people that matter. This light bulb went off, and I just said, well, let me see what doing things for myself means. And sometimes doing things for myself is giving back, and sometimes in a very passionate way. But it's for myself. It's not because I'm looking for somebody to say good job or more money or a better promotion or you're a better person. It's because it's what you really want to do. So that's what, I know it's a long answer, I apologize, but that's what endurance athletics helped me realize through a lot of introspection and a lot of lessons learned along the way, because you learn a lot of lessons when you're doing 10, 12, 24-hour, 3-day endurance events.
Wow. Yeah. Tell us about your book, Cycles of Lives.
Yeah. So Fran, I'll tell you what happened was I'll tell you a super quick story. So there's a thing called a Relay for Life. It's put on by the American Cancer Society. People get together, they form teams, they go out on a track for 24 hours and they just raise awareness, bond with each other, build community, raise money, educate, that kind of thing. My sister was kind of nearing the end of her life, and she said, man, I want to go out there and watch the team that's supporting me and hang out and lay on the lounge chair and just clap for them as often as I can in that 24 hours. And I was just like, dang, man, if you can do that, I'll go run the whole 24 hours. Right. So we can see each other. Unfortunately, she passed away 2 days before the event. So she didn't get to see it, but I said, I'm going to go and I'm going to be on there the whole 24 hours and see what I can figure out that she missed. And what I saw, Fran, and again, I'm telling you what you know, is that people were really good about dealing with the tasks of their cancer. How do I navigate insurance? How do I find a child care while I'm in the chemo chair? How do I, how do I eat better? What can I do to lessen the stress in my life? These kind of things they could do. But when it came to talking about how do you feel? What are you going through? What traumas in your life are affecting your ability to allow others to connect with you? When it came to these kind of deeper things, people were just not equipped. And I was like, wow, this is a major, major deal. So I thought to myself, I'm moved by really deep, meaningful stories, movies, books, really learning about somebody's really inspirational, moving stories. And so I said, if I could get enough different kinds of people, doctors, caregivers, loved ones, survivors, whatever, and I could get super, super deep into their stories and understand the childhood traumas they had, young adult traumas they had, what they're going through now, what they've gone through in the past, how does that affect their ability or their inability to form connections with people, have those, deep, dark conversations, needed conversations. If I could bring those stories to light, then it might better equip people to say, oh, okay, maybe that's how I can do something, or I can bring that to my life to interact with people that matter to me, or to allow them to interact with me if I'm the one going through it. So that was the idea. So I just went around and cold called cancer centers and hospitals. Who do you know? Who's got a great story? Who's inspirational? Who sticks in your mind? Found a bunch of people, talked to them for a couple of years. Didn't meet most of them, only had met a couple of them in person. And I said, hey, if we're connected by stories, we're connected by emotions, I'll connect them by going on my bike ride after I've talked to them and meeting them all. So that was the whole story. So the book brings these 15 stories in a very moving, inspirational, super deep way, very personal. They're not anonymous stories. They're real people, real stories, real names. And then my narrative in between of the bike ride, the people I met, my story of dealing with the grief of June and that type of stuff.
Amazing.
Yeah, I was going to say, first of all, I am looking forward to reading your book. That's the first thing that I'll say. And the other thing is, and it just occurred to me as you were sharing, and maybe, this isn't part of it or not, but as you were sharing, it just occurred to me that you riding your bike and doing your bike from person to person, to story is I've always pictured people's stories as interconnected with one another, and how you made that connection with your love for, endurance, athletics. And I just thought it seems brilliant to me. And there's something to that too, that they're interconnected by your journey. Because I think we're all interconnected in a lot of ways in the journeys that we have. And so often, many of these stories, David, just they're not told. And not that people are looking for recognition, but to me, because the stories are not told, people are left to feel alone because they don't have anyone that they go, yeah, that's me, and that they can make that connection to. I know at Heal Grief, with our groups that we do, that's really all we're trying to do. We're just trying to create space where people can connect their stories with one another and be validated that,
well, it's
I'm
hard
not
to
crazy,
do,
I'm not losing my mind, and I can be okay.
Yeah, I'm not telling you anything you guys don't know, but it's not easy. And it's really, really hard because there's so many facets of it. You don't want to bring people down. You feel shame. You don't want to show weakness. You don't want to say the wrong thing. There's a million reasons why people either isolate or we unintentionally abandon them, right? Usually when I'm on a podcast, I wouldn't say this to you guys because you don't fit this mold, but usually when I'm on a podcast or I'm doing a public, presentation, I'm talking about these things. I say to people, I go, friend, like, look, I know there's somebody in your life that's going through something difficult. And I know how hard it is to talk to them because you don't want to step on toes. You don't want to say the wrong thing. You don't want to be in the wrong space at the wrong time. But they're wondering, geez, how come I haven't heard from somebody and whatever. And it's like, it's this awkward thing. And the longer it goes on, kind of the harder it is to reach out because we don't want to step on our toes. We don't want to invade their space. And we don't want to make them think about something that makes them sad or whatever the million things are. And it's like kind of the opposite is what we need to do. But people have gone through such traumas that maybe, that they're afraid to reach out. Maybe they're afraid that you're going to abandon them if they show weakness, or I don't know. There's a million things. And I try to think that we all have these identifiable emotional responses to these traumas and grief. And like you said just now, Andy, so eloquently, if we can show those in a way that moves people, it will show that we're all connected by the kind of the same things and allow us to just let the guards down and connect in a really heart-centered way. Because I mean, at the end of life, right, there's only two things, right? People are either grateful for the relationships that they had and the loved ones that are by their side, or they show regret for the people that aren't by their side and loved ones that they weren't able to connect with. And so I believe most people, not everyone, most people want to connect with the people in their lives in a meaningful way, especially with regards to trauma and grief, and at times of need like that. And but we don't know how to do that sometimes.
Yeah, I say, I often say that my work that I do has been a constant reminder how important it is to love more deeply, forgive more quickly, and to be as present in the moment as possible, because the next moment may not be here.
Yeah.
Constant reminder.
It's true. And it's not trite. It's an important saying. It's an important thought, but until you allow yourself the freedom, and it took me a long time to forgive myself for not knowing what I didn't know. Right. Like you don't know until you know. And then sometimes when you know, it's a little too late, you go, shit, why didn't I know that earlier? Right.
Yeah.
And you go,
exactly.
But you don't know what you know until you know it. So once you know it, then now you can take action, but you got to be willing to know it, like with grief, you guys know this, that, I had probably really long processed the grief over losing my sister. Right. I could have used a little help, and I had some good conversations, and some people gave me some good advice and all that. And it kind of helped me get over that. But what I was carrying around for a few years, and I didn't discover it until I went on this bike ride, was that I wasn't done grieving the one person that knew about my crappy childhood. The one person who I look her in the eye and go, oh my God, that was so hard. And she wouldn't look at me and go, suck it up, don't, whatever, wasn't that bad. She would know. Right. And I had to grieve that. I had to grieve that the one person that knew me as a kid was no longer around. And that's not something we can teach for. But if we're willing to lean into the fact that we can learn along the way, and we can become aware. And like you said, Fran, we can have some urgency to the people around us because of what we learn. I mean, gosh, what a beautiful side of life, right?
Yeah, I agree. David, this has been a great conversation. We're actually almost out of time. I know it flies. We love these conversations, but they just fly by. But I would, before we end our conversation, would like to give you an opportunity just to share how those who are listening can connect with your work, connect with you. How might they go about doing that?
Sure. Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. The book is Cycle of Lives. I like to say the number one goal is, of course, to better equip people. And I think these stories are so inspirational and so moving. They're kind of shocking in how good you'll feel. I mean, some of them are kind of moving, but they're very inspirational. But my second goal, it's not as big of a goal because books don't make a whole lot of money, is that I promised the book participants that 100% of the proceeds would go to support the cancer focused and other nonprofits that they chose. So those are listed in the book. They're listed on my website. All the proceeds, whether it's an Audible or a book sold wherever, electronic book or whatever, all the proceeds that come to us go out to these organizations. So it does raise a little bit of money. And if you just look up Cycle of Lives, it was a #1 bestseller on Amazon. It's got some good awards, and it's a really good book, but it's also doing good for some great organizations.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Thank you. David, really, thank you for being a guest here on Let's Talk Death, and for sharing the inspiration behind your journey and your book and the work that you do. Thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you for connecting with me. I'm really happy to have learned more about what you guys are doing.
Awesome. And thank you to those who are joining us for this episode of Let's Talk Death. If you'd like to learn more about Heal Grief, please visit us at healgrief.org. At healgrief.org, you can learn more about all of the programs and resources of Heal Grief, including our national network of support for grieving young adults called Actively Moving Forward.
And if you know of a bereaved adult, refer them to our AMF app. where adults of all ages connect with others experiencing a similar death loss. And last, make sure you sign up on healgrief.org to receive our newsletter for links of future episodes of Let's Talk Death.
And so again, thank you for joining us, and we will see you next time on Let's Talk Death.